Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today what I'm going to teach you is basically how to get over, let's say, the fear of just picking up the guitar and playing for somebody. All us beginners have to, every once in a while, deal with that parent or that friend that sits you down and says, hey, just play us something. And that's a tough fear to come over because you might not have enough songs memorized or you don't know how to improvise. But today I'm going to show you kind of a hack to get around that. It's my own personal technique that I developed over time. And it's something called chord melody, which is a pre-existing thing, but I'm going to tell you how to kind of get around not knowing how to do it. So a chord melody is an arrangement of a song that includes both the melody and the harmony simultaneously. Chord melodies are often used in formats where guitar is the sole harmonic instrument, for example, solo guitar, or a guitar trio like guitar, bass, and drums. I'm going to walk you through a 3-step beginner's process to build chord melody. We will be using the simplest open chords that almost every single beginner knows, and it's going to be A minor, C, G, D major. Now the point of this lesson is to be able to play melodies over those easy chords and not have to think about the scales or think about too much of the music theory. In case you don't even know music theory, it doesn't really matter. You could say it's a sort of hack because it makes you sound like you're playing an actual song that you thought up beforehand or you've memorized, but in reality you're just making up on the spot. Now before we get started, I just want to thank every single one of you for helping me out by going down and hitting that like button or that subscribe button, because every single one of those helps me immensely. That's because of YouTube and people like you that just simply hit that subscribe or that like button that I'm able to do this and keep putting out lessons. So thank you so much. At the end of this video, I'm going to be giving away a very special technique that I've developed that'll help kind of put the icing on the cake for this method that I'm about to show you. So stick around. Now for this lesson, we're going to stay in the key of G major. And that's going to be using the chords G major, A minor, C major, D major. They're pretty chords, and they're the most simple chords, and they're open. So that means that we're using all these open strings to play them, and you'll see where that comes in a second. But for now, I want you to practice this chord progression. It's going to be G major to A minor, to C major, to D major. And I'll show where to place your fingers up on the screen right now. It's going to be G major to A minor, to C major, to D major. Now we're just going to be using a very simple finger picking pattern for this. And it's going to be using your thumb, your index, your middle, and your ring finger. And you're just going to be going up, all the way up the strings, and then all the way down. Thumb, index, middle, ring, middle, index. You're going to do that throughout the G, A minor, C major, D major progression. Now before we go any further, if you're a real true beginner, I want you to go through each of those chords and use that finger picking pattern and really memorize where your fingers are in those chords, because this is important for the next step to be able to produce a melody from it, especially on the higher strings, where those fingers are. And come back to me when you're done. So go ahead and pause the video. Welcome back. Let's go on to the next step. So this step 2 is where the melody comes in. And we're going to be using those 4 chords. Now because we're in the key of G, I hope you guys don't hear that there's a helicopter or something, but because we're in the key of G, you can take any of these open strings and you can add on to your chord with them. So that means that we can take any of our fingers off in the chord shape. So say we're in the chord shape of A minor, and we want to take, say, the ring finger off. It doesn't sound too off, but that's not a note that's in the chord of A minor. And so we can use that to start making melodies. So the first step to this is that we're going to learn how to do pull-offs. get your guitar and go into the chord shape of A minor. And we're just going to do that finger picking pattern. But I want you to choose one of these 3 fingers and pull off of any of these strings. So you're going to, when I get to that second string, I'm going to pull off with my index finger. And you can experiment with all of your fingers doing that. We can use that with all of the chords. So I'm going to run through all of the chords really quick and just do a very simple pull-off exercise with all of them. You can see where a melody is starting to form. But the next step is that we're going to add hammer-ons to them. So going back to this A minor chord, instead of pulling off with a finger on any of the strings above the root note, that's important by the way. If we go back to the chord G, you're not going to want to pull off the lowest note because that's kind of the anchor for the entire chord. If you take that away, then it sounds like something completely different. So stay away from doing that. So let's go back to the A minor chord. With the hammer-ons, you're going to use that chord shape, and instead of pulling off, you're going to leave one of those fingers off and make it an open string. And once you get there to that string that's open, you're going to hammer on into the chord shape. So using the same finger picking pattern, I'm going to do the index finger. There we go. So I'm going to run through the same chord progression, and I'm going to do that exercise with the hammer-ons. There we go. But now is when the real melody comes in. So you can take both those hammer-ons and pull-offs, both those techniques, and combine them into one. And that's when you start to get something very interesting. So listen to this. I'm going to use the G, A minor, C, D progression. And I'm just going to combine those 2 techniques and make a little bit of a melody off of it. There we go. That's part of the melody that's coming along. And hopefully you're starting to develop a kind of sense of where the melody should go. And I'll really catalyze that feeling in the next section. But for now, I want you guys who are true beginners again, just to run through that chord progression and use both those hammer-ons and pull-offs to open strings just for a few minutes until you get that really down, because you need to have that down for the next section where we really start making the melody come out. So come back when you've got that done. Now, if you're still struggling, I want you to go very, very slow and just go one string at a time in the chord shapes. So what I mean by that is that, say we're in the A minor chord shape, which I'll show a graphic for it right here. Just go one string at a time. And as you're rolling up, thumb, index, middle, ring finger, going up the strings, do hammer-ons. And then when you go down to ring, middle, index, I want you to do pull-offs. So I'll show you right here. And then going down, I want you to do pull-offs. There you go. And go very slow if you're still struggling. Just remember, don't add any other strings in yet. Don't add any other notes in yet. Just go with the chord shape. Now eventually you'll get to that speed, but just take it slow for now if you're a true beginner. and come back when you're ready if you were still struggling. So now, you're back? Okay, we're going on to the next section. Here is where it gets really fun, and you can start to actually make some really cool melodies. For this step, we're adding in a few notes beyond just the chord tones and the open strings. And we're going to add in, let's say, they are notes from the G major scale, but they're easier to remember as just notes from the previous chords. So if we're in the G major chord, try to visualize where the A minor chord is while you're in the shape of G major. Now we know that the notes for A minor are right here. So we're going to try to hit those A minor notes while we're in the shape of a G major chord. So we have this index finger loose, right? If you're using your pinky to get the first string on the 3rd fret. So I'm going to show you really quick what I mean. So you see, I was using these A minor notes, and then I threw in an extra note from the D major chord right here on the 2nd string 3rd fret. So for each of these chords, you can just find where those notes are in the other chords, and you can add those in using hammer-ons and pull-offs to try to make a bit of a melody. Now to make this effortless, you need to practice this over and over and over. So what I recommend to you true beginners is just start on the G major chord, go to the A minor, go to the C, go to the D, and go very slow. And just practice with that finger picking technique. Or you can mix it up a little bit and do whatever you want to do with your finger picking technique. It really doesn't matter. As long as you stick to this method of trying to hit those notes, as well as using those open strings and those pull-offs and those hammer-ons, of hitting other notes in other chords. So I'm going to show you one more time, very slow, how I would do it if I was practicing. Hitting those notes in the A minor chord, switching to A minor. There's a note in the D major chord, back to C major. That's a G major note, but going back to the D major chord. There we go. Now once you've practiced this quite a bit, and I hope you have before getting to this point of the video, I want you to experiment with just doing different rhythms, and there's that lawnmower again. I hope you guys can't hear it. But I want you to practice doing different rhythms as well as different picking styles, finger picking styles, to try to get different kinds of melodies. And once you do this enough, you'll start to hear where a melody should go. And so you're just playing through this progression and you hear, oh, I really want that note to go up. So you get to the G major, you're at the A minor, you're like, oh, what if the melody goes up before it goes to the C major? Well, that note right there is in the D major chord. Repeat that. So hopefully you start to hear and start to feel where the melody should go as long as you do this over and over and over. So I'm going to show you guys a few different examples of how you could mix up the rhythm, throw a little bit of swing in there maybe, and then a couple other finger picking techniques that I would do. I'm not going to teach you every single finger picking technique that you should use because it's more up to you to try to experiment. So I'll just show you a couple examples, see if I can come up with something. That's one example. Let's see. the next part of the video, I'm going to be showing you my special technique of that I would say is like the cherry on top of this method. So I want you guys, before we get to that, just keep practicing this and then come back, because this next technique is a little bit more advanced and you probably won't know the chord shapes for this, so they'll take a little bit longer to learn. But for those of you who are more advanced and already have this down, I'll go ahead and show this to you. Now before I get into this next technique, I want all of you to go down and hit that subscribe button if you can, and that like button, because that helps me out so much, and I appreciate all the support that I get from all of you. So thank you so much. Now let's get into it. So we're going to be switching from that G, A minor, C, D to a progression that is E minor, C major, G major, then D major. So pretty similar, but we're going to be doing different chord shapes. I'll go ahead and show you before I actually teach you how to do it. So what that's going to be is we're using the same technique that I taught previously in this video of just using the Hammer-Ons, pull-offs, and chord tones from other strings. Excuse me. And we're going to be, instead of going to the regular open D major chord that we all know, we're going to be shifting the C major chord shape up 2 frets. And that's still a D major chord. That's just an extended chord. And it sounds very pretty. So still G major. So you slide up for the D major chord. And then we're going to end on E minor. And this is where it switches to the relative minor key. And I'll show a graphic of how to do this chord up there. So it's going to be ring finger on the 7th fret of the 5th string, your first finger on the 5th fret of the 4th string, the 2nd and the 3rd string are going to be open, and then the 7th fret with your pinky on the 1st string. It's a very, very pretty chord. And then now we're going to switch to a chord progression: E minor, C major, G major, D major. So that's the whole thing. And you're going to hear E minor. That's what you're going to play first. That's the start of the next progression. And then you switch to a C major, which is going to be a whole different chord shape. But this is a very, very useful chord shape that I recommend all of you learn. It's starting on the 8th fret of the 6th string, 8th fret of the 2nd string, and 7th fret of the 1st string, using the middle finger on the 6th, ring finger on the 2nd, first finger or index finger on the 7th fret of the 1st string. It's a very, very pretty chord too. And then for the D major chord, you're going to be putting your first finger on the 10th fret of the 5th string, and you're actually going to be playing harmonics with your pinky finger. And you're going to play a harmonic of the 4th string, the 3rd string, and then the 2nd string. If you can't do this very well, I recommend just leaving your first finger out and just try doing harmonics on the 12th fret. And if you don't know what a harmonic is, it's hovering your finger above the fret, the actual bar, and that's on the bar that's right above the 12th fret. So in between the 12th fret and the 13th fret. So hover your pinky finger over the 3rd string, the 4th string, and the 2nd string, and just lightly, lightly hover it on actually touching the strings. I don't know how well you can see that. And if once you get good at that, add your first finger, your index finger, to the 10th fret of the 5th string, and just roll your fingers off. You're on your right hand. It's a very, very pretty G major chord. And now we're going to shift the whole shape, the exact same shape, but with your first finger on the 5th string on the 5th fret, and doing the harmonics on the 7th fret, in between the 7th fret and the 8th fret, over the actual bar, and you're going to be doing that harmonic to make the D major chord. Very pretty as well. So that progression. So just play that over and over, and once you get good at that, you can combine that with the G major chord progression. Really strike that 5th string. Alright, sorry, 6th string. So what I want you to take away from this lesson is that you don't need to know complex music theory to be able to add melodies to chords, and to be able to find them and hear them and feel where they should go next. You can just use those open strings as long as you're in the key of G major, and you can make those melodies. It's a lot easier than you would think, and if you don't understand it now, I recommend you rewatch this video and just slowly go over those exercises that I told you, and eventually you'll start to hear where you can play those melodies. And it's amazing. It clicks inside of your head. We can really feel like, oh, I really know where I want that melody to go next. And that's the moment that I fell in love with this technique. The point of this is to try to move your mentality away from just relying on scales and just picture those chords down at the very first 3 frets. And even though you are playing in a scale, you are picturing it as something else, which is a lot easier to imagine in your head. Just imagining those other chords, all those shapes, and only start with those 4 at first because it can kind of overwhelm you. But it just makes it so much easier. And when I figured out this method, I began to be able to just sit in front of people and just play when I was a true beginner. And it just kind of opened my world up to the different ways to implement melodies over chords. And it helped me so much. So I hope you really enjoyed. And just one more time, if you could go down there and hit that subscribe button if I helped you out, hit that like button, and hit that bell notification if you want to be notified of future videos and lessons. That would be amazing. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.